Can I ask you a question?
All right.
John, despite volatility, what keeps you optimistic about the cattle business?
I think what keeps me optimistic about the cattle business is that in the long run, we have been able to produce a very desirable product that I think the health concerns were way overblown, and as a matter of fact, health benefits offset health concerns, in my opinion. And because of that, I think there's going to be a good demand for beef right on through good times and bad. As we become more urban, as each generation becomes more urban and they get out of there, there's going to be a place, I think, for the mid-size producer, the 300 to maybe 500 head producer. And as a lot of this land goes into recreational use and asset accumulation for real wealthy investors, something's got to be done with that land. If it's not grazed, it's going to degenerate. So I think there could be some opportunity there for a young man to come in to either work for those big landowners, and as they see that you need grazing in order to maintain the ecosystem. And one of the things my Uncle Buster used to say, he said, I've heard everybody say, you've got to treat your ranching like a business. And he says, I think it's a little bit different than that. He says, I think ranching is an art form that has to be handled in a business-like manner. And I think there's something to that. You can apply a lot of business principles to a ranching, but if you're not out there and you don't understand how this business works, it won't work. So I think there's a place for a young man to get in and maybe as an employee, and then maybe as a beginning to be a partner on some of the cattle, things like that. I think there's an opportunity.
That reminds me of back when I first started following my dad around, and we were totally selling ranches to ranchers, and this is 50 years ago. He always said you have to have a 300 cow ranch to be an economical unit. Mm-hmm. I think today it's 1,000 cows.
I think you're right.
You've got to be bigger to make this thing work, which puts the strain on the young man getting started in the business. But like you say, if some young man can get started working for a family or some sort of a ranching operation and work into it over time, and maybe if you'll stick with it after 10 years, 20 years, whatever, they may be willing to let him have an ownership interest in the operation, run 10% of the cow herd or whatever as a bonus, and gradually build into ownership interest in that operation. And I see that happen with people, but if you don't have a pretty good cash amount on hand, I guess it's impossible to get started.
Well, the thing that I find is a young man wants to be in production. He wants to be in operations. He wants to gather the cattle. He wants to work the cattle. He wants to ride good horses. He wants good cows. If he will go over and get also involved in the financial end of the business and get to where he can do cash flow, break-even projections, do a budget for the next year and show how you can or can't make money, I think that's when that man that owns that ranch, his ears really perk up.
Yeah.
And he says, if I can get a guy in here that can that
Help
has both.
project. Right.
Has both he has both the skills of operations and of finances. I can use a guy like that.
No matter what time, how far back you go, I think of things my dad told me about my grandfather, that back when my grandfather got started, ranches out here in West Texas were bringing $4 to $6 an acre. And he thought that was too high. And I can remember him talking to my dad about the first ranch over here that sold for $10 an acre. And he said, son, just watch it. Those people, there's no way they can make that work. You can't pay $10 an acre. And they had posted that ranch for foreclosure, and they started drilling oil wells on it. And the family's very wealthy today, and we've sold them several other ranches.
Yeah.
But historic long-term ownerships out here in this part of the country, most of the families that have kept it together for 100 years, they've had some oil income to help that happen. But I think about that when I was working with my dad, and maybe these ranches over here were bringing $200 an acre. And my dad said, you can't pay for that.
Yeah.
It's too high. And now those same ranches will bring $1,500 an acre. And I'm thinking, that's too high, but they're still selling for that.
Yeah.
And so it's all relative to what's going on at the time. It's always been too high in the minds of people at the time it happened. But you look back and think $4 to $6 an acre, that was dirt cheap, but at that time it looked too high.
Yeah. When I came to work for Spades, ran the Spade ranches. When I'd give a talk, I'd say I've gone to work for a family that the person that their founder, their founding father, was in high tech and made a lot of money in high tech. And he came out and bought ranch land in West Texas, and he doubled the price of ranch land by his buying. He would give too much for those ranches, and he doubled their price. And so that shows you how when high tech moves into the ranch buying business, it's going to inflate your prices. The funny thing is, his name was W.L. and I.L. Elwood. It was in the 1880s, and his high tech invention was barbed wire.
Yeah.
So it's not like it hadn't changed all that much.
Well, and I've seen people over the years, Texas, New Mexico, that come in and start buying ranches in an area. Dr. Singleton in New Mexico, John Malone, Brad Kelly, a lot of those guys, and they'll come in, and when they start buying land in a certain area, that price gets inflated, but long term, they've all done well.
Mm-hmm.
It catches up after 10, 15 years, they've got a substantial profit in that, and they're blocking that land up.
Yeah.
And I can remember years ago when I started in the appraisal business, the rule of thumb was the larger the ranch, the cheaper it is per acre. The smaller ranches bring more. And that's still true today. The really small places do bring a premium, but between a 20,000 acre ranch and a 100,000 acre ranch, I don't see any difference. And it's because those big players that are parking a lot of money and blocking up big tracts of land, they would rather pay a bonus for a 200,000 acre ranch rather than take the time of 5 years to assemble 200,000 acres. They'd rather buy it all at once and pay a premium price to block it up.
Yeah. I remember when I was in Colorado and just working for myself, but one of those real savvy investors and wealthy men, I had worked with some, and I showed him a ranch, and it was, I told him I thought it was about $5 or $10 an acre too high. And, I think this was an 80,000 acre ranch. Well, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But then I went home and I figured it up, and that $5 an acre, that total amount he was going to spend on that ranch compared to his net worth, when I took my net worth and figured it, that would be like me buying a used pickup.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you don't need
It's not a
those
big deal.
$5 an acre don't mean that much to a man
A big
that's
player.
in
right.
a big player.